Hello viewers, today we're going to go over the game Rubinstein versus Salwe. This game was played in Lodz in the year 1908. Rubinstein had the white pieces and he played D4. Salwe played D5, C4, E6, knight to C3, C5. Terrash defense. C takes on D5, E takes on D5, knight to F3, knight to F6, G3, knight to C6, and bishop to G2. And this bishop is going to put some great pressure onto the D5 pawn. C takes on D4, knight takes on D4, an isolated pawn on D5 is now happened. Queen to B6, knight takes on C6, and Salwe played B takes on C6. The other option is just taking with the queen, but again, there's the weak pawn on D5, and in that position, pieces have been exchanged, and there's not as much compensation for the weakness. So B takes on C6 is better. And now Rubinstein castled. Bishop to E7 and knight to A4. This is seen in many positions, especially the two knights, Karl Khan and others. And this is a great move, putting pressure on the hanging pawn, or the backwards pawn, C6. So, back to the game. Schlechter played queen to B5. And now Rubinstein played bishop to E3, further controlling the dark squares C5 and D4. Castles was played by Salwe, and Rubinstein further controlled C5 with rook to C1, just completely locking down C5. And C6 is just a bad backwards pawn. And now C5 is a strong square. And anyway, Salwe played rook or bishop to G4. He played, but another move instead of bishop G4 could have been bishop to D7, and it's a solid move in preparing of the ensuing struggle and pressure that is going to be placed on the C6 pawn. So bishop to D7, that's a solid choice he should have chosen, or should have considered. But bishop to G4, it's an active move, and it is pressurizing the E pawn, so it's got some merit to it. Rubinstein played F3. It's a good move, pushing away the bishop and giving his dark square bishop a luft. And Salwe retreated to E6. Bishop C5, rook Fe8, rook F2. And this is pretty brilliant because Rubinstein made use, when he played F3, of that F2 square with his rook. So now that rook can also now go on to the D or C file and further control those two weak dark squares. Salwe played knight to D7. Bishop takes on E7, rook takes on E7, and Rubinstein played queen to D4. And now black, his backwards pawn is just blockaded still. And so rook E to E8 was played, and now white decides to do some regrouping because F3 did have some drawbacks, and Rubinstein, he saw he had time to overcome those drawbacks, and so he plays bishop to F1, an incredible move because it gains back the time because of the bad placement of black's queen. Rook E to C8 was played, and Rubinstein played the simple but strong E3, further controlling the D4 square and now activating his bishop. And black has no counterplay. All of white's pieces are active and well coordinated here. Queen to b7 was played. Knight to c5. Exchanging and seizing the outpost. So he's exchanging pieces, increasing his advantage, and seizing the outpost all in one with this move. Knight takes on c5, and rook takes on c5 was played. And now c5 is gained, and the pawn on c6 is fixed this time. So now it's a complete target. Rook to c7 was played. And also, you can see that now white has a good bishop instead of being stuck on g2. And black has a bad bishop. And black had better chances for successful defense if he tried to gain some space instead and try to get counterplay. Maybe even sacrificing his c6 pawn if needed eventually. He could have tried a5 here. And that would be active and sufficient. Back to the game. Rook fc2 was played, or rook 1 c2. Yeah, rook fc2 was played. Queen to b6, trying to maybe take back that c5 more. But now Rubinstein just plays this strong b4, just displaying the black's in a terrible bind on the queen side. And again, you can try the breaking back through with a5, which is a move suggested before. A5. And after rook takes on a5, there is this queen takes on d4 and rook takes on a8. Swish and zug. So a5 in this position is a mistake. And then you could consider bishop to d7, just the solid retreat, admitting that the bishop is misplaced. Then after b5, it's sort of too late because, yeah, that pin and materials being won. After rook ac8, there's going to be queen to c3, and the solid taking of c6. And the final try black could try is rook to b7, but here there follows the move a3 and bishop to d7. And yeah, nothing is good is happening. So back to a6. I mean, it's an okay, solid resisting move, perhaps. But it didn't work out well in the game. And so Rubinstein played rook to a5, stopping any a5 forever. Any activity that he had with those e5 variations is gone. And you will hear the principle of two weaknesses in the endgame. So if there's just one pawn, the defender can survive, but two weaknesses is fatal because the defensive powers of the pieces is overstretched. And here, Rubinstein is just seizing the weak a6 pawn, possibly, or even, especially the c6 pawn. And those are just forever weak, it seems. So now, Salwe played rook to b8. He could have tried queen takes on d4, but it's sort of a very pessimistic variation because after e takes on d4, there's bishop to c8 and rook takes on d5, and the pawn is lost. So the pawn is at least a +1 evaluation in this position. So back to rook to b8. Rubinstein played a3, securing his b pawn, and black played rook to a7. Black cannot guard all of his weak spots, and white wins a pawn. There's just nothing to be done. Either a6 or c6 is going to drop those two weaknesses, and any queen takes on d4s with like this, and e takes on d4s, it doesn't help. Similarly, bishop to c8, which is solid, but it doesn't help after queen takes on b6, rook takes on b6, and then the pin, using the pin, rook takes on d5, and then there's c takes on d5, rook takes d7. You can fight a terribly positionally lost game and try to get a draw, but there's only two results here. It's either a draw or a win for white. And so now back to the game. There was queen takes on c6. This combination. Oh yeah, so Rubinstein played this brilliant combination of rook takes on c6. Whoops. Which always happens. Combinations flow from a superior position, which is achieved from positional play. And so here he sees a weakness of that rook on a7 and plays this rook takes on c6. And queen takes c6 was played. And queen takes a7 was played. And black played rook a8, attacking the queen. And then Rubinstein plays this queen to c5, just making black waste time with queen b7. And Rubinstein starts improving his king after his other pieces are pretty decently placed. King to f2. And the intent here is to guard his own weaknesses, particularly on the second and third ranks here. And now the move black played was h5, just striving for something. And then Rubinstein plays bishop to e2, and Salwe played g6. Another possibility is rook to c8, or no, oh wait, g6. So another possibility, I think, was rook to c8, but it allows this combination of bishop takes on a6, and then after rook takes on c5, bishop takes on b7, rook c2 check, king to f1, rook takes on h2 would follow, bishop takes on d5, and black has no pawn, like he's down 2 pawns, and so there's not good hope in this endgame. Back to the game, queen to d6 was played, and let's see. Queen d6 was played, and now the c file is important because the c file is important because it's open. So queen c8 was played, taking advantage of the c file being open. And Rubinstein played rook c5, forcing queen b7, and now the grip is strengthened with h4. And now black tried a5, trying to dissolve the pawns, and it's a desperate counterattack. And now Rubinstein played the strong rook c7 instead of just taking and getting a blockaded a pawn. So this move is extremely strong, and queen to b8 was played, and Rubinstein just pushed forward with b5, and black tried a4, artificially isolating the b pawn, but after Rubinstein played b6, Salwe tried rook to a5, but Rubinstein finished the game with b7 because of the pawn is unstoppable. And as you can see, this game illustrates the greater weight of the effect of the pieces on weaknesses, and it shows Rubinstein's amazing positional play. And this game had a huge impression on myself, and I hope it has a great impression on all of you. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the game, and see you soon.